2021 began with an odd phone call with my old band from the 80s and ended up with the reuniting of myself and Hilly Michaels, who was producing our band in the 80s, and John Condi, guitarist and vocalist and songwriter extraordinaire. And after listening to rough mixes, John, I think, summed up the music greatly by his text to Hilly and I. And he said it left him speechless, and it's the culmination of 10 months worth of hard work, pain, sacrifice, collaboration, love, excitement, and true friendship. And I think that really summed it up well.
You're listening to All You Ever Think About Is Sparks, the only and therefore best podcast dedicated to the musical history of Ron and Russell Mail, aka Sparks. It's episode 48. This is part 2 of our 2-part Hilly Michaels extravaganza. We're going to jump right into things today, as this is going to be a long but relentlessly enjoyable one. We're starting off things with a chat Monte Mallin and I had after our 3-way powwow with Hilly in early March. After that, I punch out for the day, making way for just Monte and Hilly to commiserate about drumming, Sparks, drumming, and drumming for Sparks. Their conversation took place a couple of weeks before our aforementioned 3-man interview, which you can hear on episode 47. You can also hear and see an edited version of Monte and Hilly's chat at Monte's YouTube channel, Sparks Entertainment and Art. Go check it out. And now, I'm your U.S. mail, so shake it and a dance, goddammit. We've been doing some Hilly-centric stuff lately. Hilly Michaels, drummer for Sparks, on their 1976 album Big Beat, and of course, a solo artist in his own right. Why are we focusing on Hilly right now?
Well, how this all got started is that I was talking with Madeline Beccaro, who's a friend of the show and of the podcast, of the YouTube podcast, and she said, why don't you talk to Hilly? And I said that would be great, and she got us in touch, and that's really how Hilly and I started talking. And as we were talking, it seemed like there was an opportunity to really present his story, not only the Sparks focused stuff, but also a little bit broader. And I think we did that in the last time, but we kind of danced around the Big Beat era a little bit for 2 reasons. One is because I had already done it. I'd had the show with him where we focused on it. But 2, you and I had agreed beforehand that we would use your show as a opportunity to present the entirety of my interview with Hilly, which was actually almost 85 minutes long, whereas on my show, you only get about 25 minutes of that. So yeah. I am very grateful to you for that, and that gets us to where we are now.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, so we did, the two of us had a great chat with Hilly, about an hour and a half long. This was after you guys talked for your show, and man, and even just this morning, as I was doing some last minute prep work for this, as it was before the last time we recorded with Hilly, man, I just kept going down so many rabbit holes. This guy has had his finger in so many pies, and he's worked with so many huge names. I'm wondering, did that ever hit you as you were reading about him or talking to him? Like, wow, I mean, this guy's worked with members of the Rolling Stones. He's been with Mick Ronson and cherry vanilla. This guy should be a lot bigger than he ever became.
Well, he only wanted to be a solo artist for a very short period of his time back in the day. Then he picked it up again later. But from everything he said, that wasn't his main motivation. It was really to play with Mick Ronson, to make great music. And as you said, he did it with so many people that you can't help when you're talking to him to say, this is a really impressive individual who has really left, who has really left a legacy, in music. And it's really been fun exploring it with you.
So of course we want to spend some time talking about Big Beat, which is where his major contributions to the Sparks are. Is there something, or let me ask you this: what is special about Hilly on the drums?
Okay. Let me just give it to you as you asked me to think about this, and I did. And I guess where I'd start is that when you asked me that, it gave me a chance to really listen to Big Beat, and really maybe in a more analytical way than I have in the past. And in the past, it was never, to me, one of the great Sparks albums, and maybe it probably will never be for me one of the great Sparks albums. But as I've listened to it, I've kind of, the way I would articulate it is that it's not full throttle rock. It's Sparks does rock. And so it's a rocking album, but it's very much within the Sparks universe, and more than I may have realized in the past, or at least more than I thought about it. There's still very specific arrangements for all the musical parts, and you don't get Hilly or any of the musicians just going crazy. You have very few real guitar solos on there. Right. You don't have Hilly just doing the drums throughout the whole song, just bum, 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 just going all out. It's very much contained within the context of the music, which is how Sparks always does their music. Ron was just taking his skills as a composer and an arranger and adapting it to this milieu. And of course, he does it in the way that only Ron can. And so when you listen to Hilly, what I love about it is that he gets it. He's not looking to overcrowd the music with all his drum skills, which are enormously on display on this album. I don't want to imply anything else, but he really works within the context of the songs, and I'm happy to go over that a little bit if you like. But that's what I hear when I hear the album. So, if you listen to the tom-tom fills, they're very clearly articulated. There's only a couple occasions where they're behind Russell singing. My band just started to do the song "Peace, Love, and Understanding" by Elvis Costello, and I'm just picking that as an example. And you hear drums behind the whole thing, and it's great. It's great. You don't hear that here. A couple places you do, but you don't hear that here on this album all that much.
Gotcha.
As Hilly said, he was very much in sync with Sal Maida, the bassist, and there's a couple places where you just feel it, and you feel the propulsiveness that that they're bringing. But what I love about it is that everything is in the context of the music. The propulsiveness is there, but it's not crazy drumming. It's in the context of the male's vision. And the fact that he got that, he was the drummer who got that, given what he's capable of doing, and at a moment's notice, that says the world about him. And he really took that and grabbed it and made the most of that opportunity. So that's my overall big picture impressions of where he fit in on this album that makes it such an amazing drum. His drum contributions are just so amazing because he got it. He got what he was supposed to do. He did it 100% on target.
What you do is in service of the song, of course, and that's always been part of the Sparks MO. The song comes first. Yeah, I know that Ron had written that famous how to jam proof your track, your track tract, how to jam proof your song tract, where he didn't want those kinds of noodlings. And yeah, I totally get what you're saying. He worked within those constraints and did it very well.
Yeah.
Um, so anything in particular
Well,
pop out?
oh yeah, sure. I'll give you a couple examples. But one of the interesting things I would add is that there's almost, when you hear the cymbal work, and this is kind of building on what I was just saying, there's only two or three places on the entire album where you have a sustained cymbal crash, like psh, going out like that. It's always very psh, psh. It's very specific and precise.
Yeah.
The males don't want to have a bunch of cymbals, going
Right.
crazy behind their music. I love that. I love the way he is so respectful of Russell and Russell singing, and there's only one or two places, like I bought the Mississippi River. Of course, that don't include the town or the people around the that's where he's playing with Russell, right on target with Russell. There's a couple other places like that, but there aren't a whole lot. Most of the time, he doesn't do the drums behind that. I think it really is effective, and it makes this a Sparks album all the way. Now, other people would listen to that and say, well, duh, of course it's a Sparks album. But I'm just talking about these specific musical points that really stand out to me,
And we should also remind anyone who doesn't know that Hilly was a huge early Sparks fan.
Yeah, and that comes out in the interview when you hear the whole thing, and which I didn't put into the show. He talks about that. He heard them on the radio, and he just fell in love with them when he heard Wonder Girl for the very first time. And he talks about that. He was a huge fan right from the start. In particular, Indiscreet was the one. And I think I'm not sure if I had this in the shorter version, but he was hoping that the album after Big Beat would be more in the Indiscreet vein, and he was thought, what if we took this band and put it there and did it Indiscreet? And again, you just have to imagine what that would be like.
So he had a feel for their aesthetic, or if you could call anything the Sparks aesthetic.
Yeah.
I'm sure he understood at least that they were adventurous, but that the song came first, and there was little, if any, room for any sort of showing off as a musician or any solos or anything like that.
Yeah, he does some impressive things though as a musician. There's, on I think it's Filler Up. He plays. It's an eighth notes that he does throughout the whole song, and he hits the snare on the ands, and three, and four, and on those quarter notes throughout the whole thing, and he never lets up. And there's where he's able to really lock in with Sal. It's a great example of how he and Sal just locked in. There's another song, which one was Everybody's Stupid. There's some wonderful, wonderful work that he does there. Everybody's stupid, that's for sure. Da 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 da, and it's perfect. There's no deviation among the beats. And I remember when I talked to him years ago, I said, "Did you use a double bass drum for that?" And he said, "Nope, you didn't need a double bass drum for that." So that's something that's always
his precision. Yeah, his precision really does impress me. As I said, I was going down rabbit holes, and I listened to a lot of recordings that he made outside of Sparks and even outside of his own solo career. And I even got to hear some of his just drum tracks, just him just playing drums next to some backing tracks, but you could only hear him. And the precision was really impressive. And I came across an interview that he gave saying that he felt, well, when he gave the interview, he said he didn't feel like he was much of a better drummer technically than he was at 13. He said it just came to him. I mean, the guy just seems to be a rhythm prodigy.
Well, it's so interesting you'd say that, because there are a couple songs, I think it was Filler Up, maybe one or two others, where he does the equivalent of where they're very fast, so he doesn't have time for a big fill, but he does the equivalent of a flam or a rough. These are like traditional drum rudiments, and it would be hard to believe that he wasn't trained in it. But I think you're probably right. He just had a sense of how to use the space, to get the most out of it to propel the song.
So he's staying within the beat, within the rhythm, but he's still able to put in a little fill there. But between beats is.
Oh yeah, yeah, and he does it repeatedly and very quickly, very quickly. And the one other song I want to just mention real quickly is "Throw Her Away and Get Her New One." Shame about the lyrics, but not. I mean, compared to White Women, it's like a lullaby. But leaving that aside,
Yeah.
It musically, it's, I think, one of the real standouts on the album, and he has some killer fills throughout that whole thing. There's great guitar work there. That's one where you can really hear him kind of letting loose a little bit, and I would commend that one to your listeners as one to really listen to. If I can say something non-drum related, I don't understand why in this digital age they still can't fix the ending of that. When you listen to it on Spotify, it still gets cut off. I don't get that. Why don't they just swap out the song with the right one? But maybe
throw away and get a new one.
Yeah, it ends before it ends early.
I guess I hadn't noticed that. I'm gonna have to listen to that, or slip it into this, slip that into the show somewhere.
I just don't understand why they can't fix it, but
Get a new one, unless that was all part of the plan. So I'm curious if he, this may be a little outside the lines, but I wonder if he was involved in any of the B-sides that didn't make it onto Big Beat. Things like, oh gosh, what was it?
I don't like Tearing the Place Apart.
Tearing the Place Apart, or
Confusion, Intrusion, Confusion. He might. That one he might have been on, but I think they were recorded. I think they were recorded for the Indiscreet sessions as a rule.
Sounds right.
Or then you have England and I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was during the transition.
That's
which
true.
I don't think he was on either of those.
But that was produced by Rupert Holmes, if I remember correctly. But he wasn't involved. And Gone with the Wind.
Maybe that's the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they brought him in for the recording of the album, produced by Rupert Holmes, and then he toured with them for a while.
He did.
And and of course when you listen to it, it's clear that Ron and Russ or Rupert or whomever thought they had something special in their rhythm section, because it's cranked way up in the mix. That's one of the defining features of the album, is that Hilly, bum 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 bum. I mean, you hear the drums cranked up to 11 the whole time through.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah, I had that in a couple of my notes. Actually, there's a couple songs where you just hear the drums more than you hear anything else. The guitars are the one thing you hear the least is Ron. But it was clearly meant to, he talks about that in the interview, that Rupert just loved the rhythm section. Just let that drive the album.
So Rupert loved it. Okay, well, that's good, because it did sound like Hilly didn't have a lot of success with several producers that he had worked with, but maybe Rupert and him had some simpatico, at least on that record.
Yeah, I think they did. I think he did. He feels that the record was named after his drumming.
I would not be surprised. Yeah. And it's also interesting that a couple of the songs on that album, Sparks had demos of going a few years back, including I Like Girls. I think maybe there were some others, but certainly I Like Girls. And it really is given new life with the version that you hear on Big Beat. And I really think those drums make a big difference.
Well, it really raises an interesting question of what if it wasn't so controlled? What if it really had just been all out rock and roll? What's that?
if they let Hilly go wild
They let the whole
and
band
sell
just
that.
go wild. Yeah,
Mm,
that would be a different album, but it would sure be a great one to hear.
it would be. It would be. Yeah. It would be unusual for Sparks for sure because it would. Um. Because they're so much. It's so controlled usually when you hear a Sparks song. Everything is fussed over and not a lot of improvisation going on.
Well,
So
it
that would
reminds
be
me of the conversations we had about uh, Womp That Sucker and Angst, where
yeah.
they really seem to let the reins go a little bit. It's
True,
just
yeah.
so enjoyable.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, but if even so, it's not like you heard the players on either of those albums really go crazy. No one got like a wild solo, but there was a little bit of birth, given within a song for them to do some stuff. And I would love to hear something like that with Hilly on drums,
No, that would
just
be
to add an
amazing.
accent here or
That would be
there.
amazing.
I know. Well, that's cool. So, was there anything in the interview, the larger interview, that didn't make it into the final cut on your YouTube channel that you guys talked about that you really thought was interesting or would want listeners to know?
I just think that it's interesting to hear the full story of how he hooked up with Sparks, which I only kind of, all these things I presented in a condensed version, but to hear the full story, to hear what he was doing before that with some of the bands that he was playing with,
Cherry
it's the
Vanilla.
lead up, but then also, afterwards, yeah, I guess afterwards he talks about how this led to some of the music that he ended up making. And I think
Mm,
that's really worth hearing. I think the whole thing was a great conversation, but I just didn't have the room for it. So
yeah, very cool.
yeah.
Yeah. And also it's just it's wild to me how he was able to meet so many people so early on in his career that either were already big people in rock music or would soon become big people in rock music. Like his the first band or one of his first bands anyway that he played with had Michael Bolton in it as a major player. I assume he was the singer. They formed a band called Joy, and so I listened to a few of their songs, and they were recording their first songs about exactly the same time, and I believe in the same city as Ron and Russell when they were recording the first 1969 Sparks demo album.
That's amazing.
It's funny to think about.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it speaks for itself, and you know, it's just a nice thing to have on the record. So I'm very
Hmm.
appreciative that you're giving it an airing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Was there anything from his solo career or any of the production stuff that he's done that you guys also got into that didn't make it to that into the final cut?
Yeah, there is a little bit of that. A lot of it dealing with other aspects of his solo career. I think we covered on your last episode.
Hmm.
On that one, we really focused on the Sparks era, but letting him tell the whole story of how it all materialized is pretty priceless. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
There's one thing that I was going through his uh, his Facebook page, which is actually run by uh,
Tom
the
Ferranti.
guys. Thank you. Yeah, Tom Ferranti. Thank you. Uh, and for a while, there are all these updates with him and you're gonna have to help me out with names today. Another musician, and they had been working on a bunch of songs, and they were expecting an album release sometime in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's not coming to me now, darn it.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but I know he's
Yeah.
always been working on music, and I think now he's not so much, but I think
Okay.
he always kept a hand in.
Well, there was an official release somewhere that I was looking for and hoping that it existed. But it's as far as I know that the last thing that he officially released was about 15 or so years ago.
Yeah.
But but he also again, if you go through some of that stuff curated by Tom Ferranti, he's got just a giant trove of songs that just didn't get published, didn't get recorded or um,
Yeah.
you know, mixed in any sort of proper way. So he's got a lot in him. And I really hope that gets to see the light of day in some way that might reach people who, are interested in what he has to offer.
Movement, color, and surprise are the elements of animation. Gary Gutierrez Colossal Pictures has produced some of the most striking animation mixing reality and fantasy. Colossal Pictures has developed a photo motion technique which employs motorized still photography and computers to animate his images.
We've taken this photo motion technique and continue to try to find new ways of using photo motion, mixing three-dimensional objects sometimes with two-dimensional photographs. We do that in Hilly Michaels, where we had actual inflated balloons in multiple planes on the animation stand, intermixed with cutouts tinted cutout photographs to create a really oddball effect that I don't think we could get any other way. The main problem is the balloons keep popping.
Hi, Monte Mallin, and hi, Monte Mallin's audience. It's such a pleasure being here. You're such a lovely audience. We'd love to take you home.
Well, I should tell you, I'm not a big Beatles fan.
You're not a big Beatles fan.
Not a big Beatles fan, no.
How about a Badfinger fan?
Oh, I like Badfinger.
Well, I'll get to Badfinger soon when we were rehearsing for Big Beat. But I got to tell you something about being introduced to Sparks. I think that would be a...
That's the place to start. How did you end up the drummer on that important album? How did you meet him? How did it all get started, Hilly?
Good question, Monty. Good question.
Well, you led me to it. You made it so easy for me.
I've had many good questions. Yours is the best so far. I flew out to California from Connecticut with Michael Bolton and some very important people, Mark Friedland, Ribs Friedland, all part of the Michael Bolton band. And we were all 19, 20 years old. And we got signed to an independent record producer by the name of Michael Z. Gordon. And he brought us into Pentagram Records, and we signed a recording contract based on some demos we did. And we were cutting tracks at Sound City in Van Nuys, the famous Sound City. And we cut about 7, 8 songs with the Michael Bolton band, with Mark Friedland on keyboards and Ribs Friedland, the manager. None of this would have happened if it wasn't for Ribs Friedland. But Michael would have been famous anyway. We all knew that God kissed Michael a couple of times to get a voice like that. We all knew that Michael was the ticket here in New Haven. I grew up with Michael, and we were playing in cover bands for 4 years. And then we cut these demos and we gave them to Ribs Friedland, and he was out in California And he said, I think I got you guys a deal. You got to come out of here. You got to come out here and sign this recording contract with Pentagram Records. Al Schmidt and Steve Douglas owned it. For record buffs, Al Schmidt and Steve Douglas are pretty heavy. I won't waste any time on them, but while we were recording at Sound City, the record company folded, and we had about 8 songs recorded, and we didn't know what to do. So I started doing session work as a drummer at Sound City because our independent record producer, Michael Z. Gordon, loved my drumming. And he kept bringing me in to do session after session after session. And he introduced me to another band he had signed called Peaches and Cream. And they were signed to RCA Records. And they were due to do a single in New York City. And they sounded very much like Beatles, Badfinger, Everly Brothers. So one day, I said to Michael, I'm quitting the band. We're going nowhere. We got no more deal. And I'm joining Peaches and Cream. So we went to New York. We cut a single called Hold On. And I went back to California. These two main guys, Arliss and Larry, went back to their hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, and Council Bluff, Iowa, which were like 5 minutes from each other. And we were living in the middle of the worst poverty I had ever lived through. But I love the concept of these guys sounding like the Lost Raspberries, Badfinger Beatles. And we began playing around. The record flopped, so we had to support ourselves. And one night in a Chevy, where we all used to ride around together, this beat up Chevy, it was 1973, and we're listening to the radio. I'm in the back seat, and someone's turning the dial, and I hear, do, 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 do. She was a wonder girl, that girl. And he switches the channel. And I go, dude, don't turn that dial. Get it back to that band. Who was that? Who was that music? And I eventually found out it was Sparks doing Wonder Girl. And it left such an indelible impression in my mind. I never ever forgot about it. It never crossed my mind to go out and get their records, but it was planted in my head. Wonder Girl. And we had enough of playing gigs around Omaha, and we drove out to Hollywood, California, sorry. And we were living in Hollywood. I was living in Beverly Hills. I had a great girlfriend with a beautiful house there. And every time we would walk down the street, we would see these pictures of Mick Ronson, Slaughter on 10th Avenue, Slaughter on 9th Avenue, with the tear running down his face, billboard after billboard. And I was a huge David Bowie fan and an even bigger Mick Ronson fan. And I would see his billboard like almost every day. Went out, bought his album, loved his record. And he was like my freaking hero, bigger than the Beatles or any kind of musician. Mick Ronson was the guy. And things kind of fell apart with the Omaha, Nebraska guys, and I jetted back to New York City, and Michael was already back in Connecticut, and he had signed a new recording contract. This is about 2 years later with RCA, and the record producer, Jack Douglas, not the same Jack Douglas who did Double Fantasy, the guy who produced the Guess Who. We went up to Montreal to record Michael's record called Every Day of My Life, which I happened to write the title track for Michael's album. Little known fact. And nobody really knew that I was capable of writing songs. I brought a song to the rehearsal. Michael flipped out. Who wrote this song? Anyway, we go to Montreal, we cut it, and we're getting ready to do some gigs and waiting to see what the record's doing. And one evening, Mick Ronson walks in because he was looking for lead singers after his, Slaughter on 9th Avenue or 10th Avenue, help me out here, and Play Don't Worry. And in walks Mick Ronson and his wife, Susie, and I was like melting. We were sitting in a circle, and Mick came in from New York, and he was interested in seeing our band play that night because he heard so much about Michael Bolton through our keyboard player, Patrick Henderson, who was Leon Russell's keyboard player and Michael Bolton's musical director. So after the gig, I never got to talk to Mick, but I was in seventh heaven, having the opportunity to meet him and sit around and talk with him. And the keyboard player one night pulls me aside and he goes, "Listen, I'm doing a project in New York City with this girl, Cherry Vanilla, who actually discovered David Bowie when she was in England as a main actress for the live stage version of Andy Warhol's Pork. And after the show, she went to a club and she saw David Bowie, and her and a bunch of people just steamrolled David Bowie into Main Man Records. And this guy, Patrick Henderson, said to me, "Listen, I want you to play drums for this other band in New York." I said, "Who else is in the band besides this incredible woman, Cherry Vanilla?" And he said, "Mick Ronson's going to be playing guitar." And I said, "Where do I sign?" "Any band that Mick Ronson is in, I'm going to play in." So we did like 3 months of shows at a place called Trudy Heller's. No Mick Ronson ever showed up for rehearsals, and I was so let down. But anyway, the band sounded super hot. And one night, after one of our gigs, who walks backstage? Mick Ronson. And he's looking at me and he's giving me such incredible compliments, comparing me to Ainsley Dunbar and saying to me, "I want you to be my drummer when you're finished with Cherry Vanilla. And by the way, Hilly, you're wearing so much bloody makeup." I had makeup like dripping down from my eyes, eyeliner, mascara, and sweat. And I looked like Alice Cooper. And Mick was just looking at me and laughing at me. And he said, "Hilly, I never wore half that much makeup when I was with David. You got to tone it down. But here's my number. When it's over, give me a call. And after 3-4 months doing incredible shows with Cherry Vanilla and having the Andy Warhol crowd and the David Bowie crowd showing up every night, it finally came to an end. And I called up Mick Ronson, and he told me to come over, and we got on like long lost best friends. He invited me to stay in his 5-story loft with a fully equipped rehearsal room on the first floor. And he said, Hilly, you're my drummer. I want to find other members. Let's go out at night, go to clubs, and let's find another guitar player and a bass player. And you're going to be my main guy in finding the right players for the Mick Ronson band. So after month after month after month of going around these clubs in New York City, we couldn't find the right guy that Mick wanted. But I was having a blast, living with Mick and recording with Mick every day and just, having a super bond with Mick. We just really had some kind of simpatico going on. And one day, John Mellencamp, at the time he was called John Cougar, walks in and he goes, hey, Ronson, you're looking fucking shabby today. And he's talking to Mick in such a demeaning way, but Mick's just cracking up and taking it. And he's saying to Mick, look, I just signed with Main Man Records, and I want you to produce my album called Chestnut Street Incident, and I need a band. And Mick said, well, I could get the guys from the Rolling Thunder Review, but I want you to use my drummer right here. His name is Hilly Michaels. And Cougar, just on Mick's word, said, okay, let's book it for next week. And we went into the studio. It was like my first huge major session with all these amazing players. I won't drop any names, but I recorded Chestnut Street Incident, the fast version of the title track and the slow version of the title track. Then a couple of weeks later, Mick's roommate, Danny, who was looking after Mick, said, hey, Ronson, those guys Sparks are here. They're knocking on the door downstairs. Should I let them in? And my heart was going boom, 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 boom. Ron and Russell Mail from Sparks. Are you kidding me? Oh, my God. That's Wonder Girl, the Wonder Girl song. And they walk in and they said, Mick, we just signed to Columbia. This is right after Indiscreet. And we just signed with Columbia. We want you to produce our new record. And this is Sal Maida from Roxy Music we brought with us. And do you know of any great drummers? And Mick says, yeah, my drummer over here. His name is Hilly Michaels. He's awesome. And Ron and Russell are looking at me and they're smiling. They go, is there a place we could jam here? And Mick goes, yeah, I got a full rehearsal room. So we marched down to the rehearsal room and there was a baby grand. There were SVT bass amps there. Mick had his orange amp. There was a great set of drums there. And Ronnie started tinkling out Big Boy. And Mick was just turning it up to 11 and arranging it. And everyone had their tape recorders on, their cassette recorders, including me. And we did song after song after song after song, Monte, and it sounded like the most amazing music I had ever come across. My favorite band in the world, my favorite guitarist in the world, and I'm going to be a part of this. Oh my God. So a couple of days later, well, Ron and Russell leave, and I say to Mick, our search is over for the new Mick Ronson band. We have a band now. We have Ron and Russell. We'll get a guitar player. We'll find, there's Sal Maida. He's awesome. Me and him get on really great. And Mick didn't say anything. And a couple of days later, I get a phone call from Sparks Management. I was in Connecticut at the time. And they're saying to me, look, Hilly, it's not going to work out with Mick producing Sparks, because if Mick produces Sparks, no one's going to be able to duplicate Mick Ronson's guitar lines. And Mick does not want to join the band at this time. He loves the band. He loves how the jam, the 4-hour jam that came out sounded, but he's got so many things going on right now. He can't, and he doesn't want to do it right now.
But it must have been amazing to be part of that experience.
I know.
Experience.
It was like worlds colliding. It was so crazy, like two comets smashing together. And I had already been with Mick for 1.5 years. And now Sparks is asking me to join the band. And I'm on the phone with their manager. And he's saying, listen, how much are you making with Mick Ronson every week? And I tell him, and he goes, I thought so. You're doing him a super favor. I said, yeah, we're bandmates. You know, it's the Mick Ronson band with me, Hilly Michaels, and he loves my drumming. So why shouldn't I continue playing with him? And he says, Hilly, be realistic. You're walking into a proven band who are gold and platinum recording artists. They are super famous all over Europe, and they want you to play drums on the record. They want you to tour with them after the record is produced, but we cannot use Mick Ronson. And I was really torn, and I said to him, look, John, from John's Children, I said, John, I got to talk to Mick about this. I'm not throwing Mick under the bus, you know, because I got an offer from Sparks, you know, my favorite band in the world. So I went back to New York and I had a conversation with Mick, and Mick's pacing around the living room. And I go, Mick, what is going on with you not producing the Sparks record? We sounded hellified. We sounded amazing last week. And he goes, Hilly, I know, but I just don't want to join any band now. I wanted to be the Mick Ronson band. And I got plenty of work. And I love you for sticking it out with me, Hilly, for 1.5 years. And we're best mates. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to join Sparks, do the record, go on the tour, promote the record, and you and I will catch up down the road. 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, don't worry about it. I love how you play, and your phone will be ringing with me to find out what's going on. And I'll be keeping my ear out for Sparks. But I want you to go on tour. And I said, are you sure? Because I don't want any hard feelings between me and you, Mick. I've been with you for a year and a half, and I don't want to just walk away after a year and a half. He goes, Hilly, listen carefully. I want you to do this. I want you to play with Sparks. You've never gone on a major US, Canadian, worldwide tour and did a record with a super band like Sparks. Don't worry about me. So I said, well, if that's how you feel, great. And we shook hands, and Ron and Russell were in New York, and the three of us were hanging out in New York City looking for guitar players to bring back to New York, back to California to begin rehearsing. But in the meantime, we had to cut the record, which happened to be called Big Beat. Now, during the rehearsals for the untitled song, which turned out to be Big Beat, Rupert Holmes turns up. And he's going to be the new producer. He's going to be taking over Mick Ronson's role as the record producer. And I said, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. How do you go from Mick Ronson to Rupert Holmes? But Rupert showed up at the rehearsals, and he would sit right in front of my drum riser and listen to my kick drum and my snare drum and listen to Sal's bass amp. And after a few songs, he would get up and he'd go, Hilly, you and Sal sound like cannons going off. You guys sound great together. I love it. Let's finish up the rehearsals, go into Sound City on 57th and cut the record. So we finished up the record, and during this time, Sal and I would hear a new song Ronnie would present, and Sal and I would have a sidebar. And Sal and I were huge Badfinger fans. Yeah. And we'd go, let's put the Badfinger touch on this one. And let's put the Badfinger touch on this one. Everything was based around the Badfinger feel and groove.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something.
Yeah, please.
You were a fan of the band, right? And their last album was Indiscreet. Were you surprised that the new music that they were making was so radically different from what was on Indiscreet? And just in general, that it was rocking as hard as it was compared to where they had been?
Well, good question, because I was thinking, Monty, that Rupert Holmes was going to put all these string arrangements on it and make it huge and lush and horns and violins and symphonies after we put our monstrous basic tracks down. So we cut all the basic tracks, and then Rupert says, okay, you guys could take a break for the next week or two. Me and the engineer are going to finish it up. And that included, we did some background vocals on it, but we weren't there for Russell's lead vocals. And we got a phone call from Rupert saying, come down to the studio. The record is mixed. We've been up for 24 hours mixing it, and it's done. So me and Sal were hanging out, and we go into the studio thinking, oh my God, this is going to be outrageous. Rupert Holmes symphony orchestras and horns are going to make it so freaking powerful. But when he played track one of Big Boy, Sal and I looked at one another and we went, what's going on here? And then Mississippi River. And then Everybody's Stupid. And we're going, where are the horns? Where are the strings? This is like stripped down rock and roll. And Sal and I just looked at each other and thought, well, what the hell do we know? You know, if Ron and Russell love it and Rupert Holmes gives it a double thumbs up, I'm good with it.
But were you expecting it to not be a rock and roll record? I mean, clearly that's what the track sounded like. And, and Jeff Salen was a pretty hard rocking guitarist, too.
Yes, he was. But he was no Mick Ronson. And I love Jeff Salen's parts, but he had some big shoes to step into, namely Mick Ronson, and he was a little intimidated. Rest in peace, Jeff. He did a fine job, and it was me, Sal Maida, and Jeff Salen who pounded out all those songs on Big Beat. And Sal and I would call one another and we'd go, what did we just hear? Where is that monster sound that we had, at the church studio, with these giant halls and incredible acoustics? And what happened? Where is the rest of the production? The strings, the horns? And we both thought, oh, well, what do we know? This is what Ron and Russell have thumbed up, and this is what Rupert Holmes loves. And before we left New York, we searched New York for one more guitar player to bring back there. And it was Jimmy McAllister we found in New York. And he was such a nice chap to get along with. And we loved him. We loved his guitar playing. So me, Russell, Ron, and Jimmy flew out to LA. And for some reason, Sal was not invited at first. And we go out to LA, and I hear news that the album that we just recorded is now going to be called Big Beat. And I went, Big Beat? Oh my God. I am so flattered. I'm with the best band I've ever wanted to be in. And they're calling the record after my drumming. Big Beat.
As I said at the beginning, your drumming propels that record, and I will revise it now based on this conversation to say that you and Sal together created the propulsive rhythm section that just made this record something really unique and special, and very different from what you would normally get up to that point from a Sparks album.
I know. Sal and I would have these sidebars after Ronnie would tinkle out the chords on the piano and Russell would sing along. And Sal and I would have sidebars and we'd name a Badfinger song and we'd go, let's take parts, let's take the feel from this Badfinger song. Let's take the feel from this Badfinger song and turn the amps on 11 and just crunch it, Sal. And that's what we did. And there were no strings, there was no orchestration, no horns, but we went along with it. And I got news that it was going to be called Big Beat. And hey, look, I couldn't be a happier duck in the pond at that point, Monty. we ended up with a bass player when we were rehearsing by the name of David Swanson from the band Pop out in California. And he looked the part, but we did 3 live shows with him doing the Big Beat album. And me, Ron, and Russell, we'd get together every day and talk about the pros and cons of the band, what needs to go, what needs to be amplified, what needs to be taken out. And unfortunately, David Swanson got the short end of the stick. And I said, listen, me and Sal Maida, knock one out of the park for you guys. Why isn't he here? I want to play with Sal Maida. I love David Swanson. I love the guy. I love his bass playing, but me and Sal Maida sound like we've been playing together for 20 years. Let's get him out. So Ron and Russell took my advice, and after 3 or 4 shows, Sal came out, and we did a few quick rehearsals with Sal, and we went out for 3 months, and it was a very odd tour, Monty.
Well, I want to talk about the tour, but I want to talk a little bit more about the album first, because
Okay.
there's 2 really interesting things that come to mind here. One is that Ron and Russell were really behind making this change in their music to a more hardcore sound that you get on Big Beat. This wasn't just something they fell into. They were really behind it, weren't they?
Yes. Punk and heavy metal was on the cusp, bubbling under in New York. And they wanted to be with the upcoming music flavor for the next year or 2, and decided that they were going to take a totally different production view from Come On to My House, Indiscreet, and
Propaganda.
Propaganda. Thank you. Tony Visconti did Indiscreet, right?
Correct. Yes.
That was one of my favorite Sparks album, and it remains to be my favorite Sparks album. And I thought Rupert was going to pull all the tricks out of his bag.
Now I understand where you're coming from. Okay.
Yeah. And after we laid down the tracks, we said, man, we have cannons and missiles and nuclear bombs here. Rupert has all the basic tracks here to lay down his bag of tricks and put down horn sections, string sections, but he chose to go with the New York City punk thing that was on the rise.
And that was clearly what they wanted to do.
And Ron and Russell, despite what I may have said during a few meetings, they chose to go with their gut, and they went with whatever Rupert wanted to do. And we went out on the road, and for 3 months, North America, Canada, and California, all over the US. And we were matched up with the Patti Smith band. So whose ever record was doing best in that city would headline. So if Sparks outsold Patti Smith in Cleveland, we would headline, and Patti Smith would be second on the bill. But if Patti Smith was blowing away our record sales in a particular city, they would headline, and we would, we would be the warm-up band for the Patti Smith band. It was crazy. It was very Fellini-esque. You couldn't ask for two more distinctive styles. Patti Smith band and Sparks, Big Beat, on the same bill. Who would have thought? But it happened. We played about, 80, 85 shows. The last show we played was on New Year's Eve at the Santa Monica Civic. And the opening act, it was sold out in California, Santa Monica Civic. The opening act was a band nobody had really heard of called Van Halen.
They did okay for themselves.
Yeah. They blew everyone away on that show. And then Flo and Eddie came on after Van Halen, and then Sparks, headline came out last, and Russell came out in a big diaper to bring in the new year. Russell comes out with a big white diaper, and he does our set and all the hits. And after the show, people came back to the dressing room and they said, Hilly, you guys did a great show, but who was that first band? Van Halen? They were amazing, Hilly. Who were they? Yeah. I said, I don't know. I didn't really hear them. I was in the dressing room getting pumped up. They were that good, huh? Hilly, the guitar player, was the best guitar player I've ever seen in my life. I said, you're kidding me. They said, no. So after that Santa Monica Civic gig, naturally, me, Sal, and Jimmy, we were all thinking about what we're going to do next with Sparks. And we were sitting in our motel rooms and wondering what the next album was going to be, because after all, we were the new Sparks band. And word came down from the top. Hilly, Jimmy, Sal, we're sending you back to New York. We're rethinking this whole next Sparks record for Columbia or CBS. And thank you very much for your output. You guys did an outstanding job. But unfortunately, we are going to take a major turn in our direction, and your services will no longer be required. And I was like so crushed and heartbroken, Monte. And during this waiting time,
well, let's go back for a second. Let's just go back for a second. You're saying that they said we're going to take a major change and a turn in our direction. Yeah. So do you think that they had something in mind at that point that led to introducing? Because my impression was always that after Big Beat was not commercially successful, Columbia said to them, we want you to do something a little different.
Yes. A major suit at CBS, I forgot his name, who produced it, Terry something, who produced Introducing, said, I know what to do for Sparks. I know how to produce them. And if they don't do it my way, they're not doing a record. And they've got to do what we tell them we want them to do. So I guess they played all the material from introducing to this guy, Terry. And he said, leave it to me. I know what to do. I'm going to get all these session players and we're going to make it as if it's the very first Sparks record ever put out there, introducing Sparks.
He certainly did. So do you ever think what a second album with the Big Beat Band might have sounded like? I imagine that would have been just out of this world.
It would have been out of this world because we were feeling our Wheaties. And after doing the record, we had learned so many studio tricks, so many arranging tricks. We learned a hell of a lot from Mick Ronson. We were dying to do another Sparks record and hoping someone like Tony Visconti or some huge, maybe Todd again, some huge record producer would step in and let us have our day in court for the second record. Come on, we're a new band. We gave you sweat and blood for Big Beat. Let us show you what we could do for these songs. But
well I'm going to push back a little bit because I think Big Beat is a great album. I mean,
yeah, me too. The songs on there are just unbelievable songs.
Yeah, but you were looking for something more. Actually, tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying that you were looking to do something that would maybe keep the Big Beat mentality and the band together, but maybe go back into a little bit more of a traditional Sparks mode. Or am I misunderstanding you?
Yes, tone it down, get away from the grunge kind of feel. Me and Sal had an incredible sensibility for pop music. We had the same library of great artists we loved, like Slade, The Sweet, Badfinger, Beatles, Roxy Music, and ABBA. I mean, me and Sal knew that if the drums and the bass can kill it, the guitar players just need a chance to come up with some cool guitar riffs and have a known producer come in to produce introducing Sparks. But, that's all political, Monty. I don't know what happened, but I was heartbroken and really depressed. But one good thing came out of it is I began writing songs like crazy, super bubblegum songs. And me and Jimmy McAllister would sit in our motel rooms and I would take a guitar and I'd say, Jimmy, if this thing doesn't happen with Sparks, let's put a band together and call it the Grumpkins. And let's be like a rock and roll Archie band and have it be like half cartoon, half real people, and super, super bubblegum, hardcore, heavy duty pop music and call it the Grumpkins. And we were so excited about doing that. And I sat down before leaving, before being let go, and I wrote 3 or 4 songs for this Grumpkins thing, which flourished later on. And I think I had written Calling All Girls at the time. and another few songs from Calling All Girls. But had it not been for the turn of events and that bummer phone call that, no, guys, CBS is putting their foot down and they're controlling everything about introducing Sparks material. But me and Sal and Jimmy were ready to take all our best pop sensibilities and draw upon indiscreet Come On to My House and Propaganda and get back to the Dinky Diamond drumming and get back to the 3 albums that really did it for the guys.
Yeah.
But we never had the opportunity to do it. And we kind of felt cheated. But look, we left on great terms. Ron and Russell still loved us. We loved them. They were the best band guys I ever came across in my life. They were such super great friends, normal as can be. And
you enjoyed hanging out with them in California, if I recall you mentioning to me once.
Every day they would pick me up in Ron's, what's it called? That Volkswagen Bug, was it called?
I don't know.
It was a Volkswagen, kind of like eccentric Volkswagen Jeep. And every day he'd pick me up, and me, Ronnie, and Russell would go to farmers market before the tour, after the tour, and we would just sit there day after day after day and talk about the next step, what we did right, what we did wrong, and just carefully scrutinize our moves. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What should we do the next time? And Ronnie and Russell, I can't think of 2 nicer guys and 2 more talented guys than those 2 guys. They knew about music like they totally blew my mind. I couldn't believe the musical knowledge that Ronnie and Russell had. And I was just sitting there privy to listening to Ron and Russell. And I was included on the conversations. And it was a dream come true. Going to farmers market with Ronnie and Russell every day. Going to crazy Ingmar Bergman films at night. Doing really artsy things with them.
But you may not have produced the record you thought you were going to make, but you can take a lot of, I'm sure you take a lot of pride in the record that you did make.
Yes. Yeah. It was done with great passion, and we drew a lot on the Mick Ronson cassettes. We had 4 hours of me, Salmeda, Mick Ronson, Ronnie and Russell jamming for 4 or 5 hours in a row, playing around 5, 6 of the songs that made it to Big Beat. And we would always go back to our cassettes and listen to what Mick had instilled in the music. And, I truly was blessed, Monty, working with Mick and then working with Mick and Sparks. I couldn't ask for 2 better bands or musicians to hook up with. It was just awesome, awesome, awesome. And then one day, after Sparks broke up, I went back to Connecticut in New York, and we were doing a lot of sessions as the Sparks backing band for Big Beat. And we were getting a lot of sessions and playing live for newly signed artists. And then that kind of died out after 5-6 months. And I got word that Dan Hartman from the Edgar Winter Band was putting a band together. And I said, oh my God, Edgar Winter, I love that guy.
Yeah.
And Dan Hartman, I love that guy, Mr. Pop. And I called Dan on the phone and I introduced myself as the drummer for Sparks. And Dan screamed and he said, oh my God, Sparks is my favorite band. You got to drive up here tomorrow. It's only a 20-minute drive. And I did the same thing with Dan Hartman that I did with Mick Ronson. A year and a half, just living with Dan. He had a 24-track studio in his house. And we auditioned guitar players and bass players for about a year and a half. And we finally I found G.E. Smith in Wallingford, Connecticut. I was doing a session in Wallingford, Connecticut with this guy, Roger C. Real, his debut album. And I called up Dan and I said, Dan, our year and a half search is over. I found our guitar player. His name is George Smith. And he later said, I'd prefer you call me G.E. Smith. And Dan said, great, bring him up to Westport. And we show up at Westport, and GE was in Wallingford playing in a cover band, for like 5-10 years. And we get to Dan's, and who is at the house? Vinny Cusano, who later changed his name to Vinnie Vincent. And we decided to create a pop band together. And Dan was happier than a side of bacon, man. I don't know. He was so happy. He loved GE's guitar playing. He said, Hilly, what a great discovery. And we loved Vinnie Vincent's guitar playing. And we put a power pop band together. We rehearsed at Dan's house for 3 months. And we played 3-4 shows. What city are you in, Monty?
Washington.
Washington. Okay, there's a chain of clubs out here called Toad's Place. Ever hear of them?
Yes.
Yeah, we played Toad's Place. And we killed them. We slayed the audience. We're doing Free Ride. We're doing Free Ride. We even did Calling All Girls. We did a lot of the Edgar Winter hits that Dan had written and sang and sung. And we slayed the audience at 3 or 4 clubs. And we were killer. We were awesome.
So you mentioned Calling All Girls. At this point, your solo career had taken off a little bit.
Yeah, that's a backstory. While I was at Dan's, I said, Dan, I have these unfinished demos I did when I got back from Sparks like 7 months ago, and Rupert Holmes helped me produce the basic tracks. Would you help me piece together the other missing pieces? And he goes, let's hear them. And he hears Calling All Girls, he hears Gemini, he hears a few others, and he goes, I love these. I'm going to play guitar. You tell me what to play, I'll play it. you want me to sing Oz and yah, yah, yah? And I wanted this huge wall of sound like ABBA. And Dan helped me create 4 of the demos that got me signed to Warner Brothers. They were outstanding. And I got to tell you, my demos put Roy Thomas Baker's final mixes to shame. My demos were 10 times better than the Roy Thomas Baker final mixes in production. That's a backstory. But Dan loved playing on my cartoon influenced pop songs, and we ended up playing Calling All Girls live and lots of Dan Hartman material. We played Hoochie Coochie, Hoochie Coochie, rock and roll, Hoochie. I can't remember.
The rock and roll Hoochie Coo, the Derringer song.
Yeah, we did that. We did a lot of Dan songs, Free Ride, Hanging Around, all the best of the Edgar Winter band stuff. But then after doing 3 months of this, Dan wakes up and he says, listen to this, guys. I recorded everything by myself, and it's a disco song. And Studio 54 was just beginning to jam in 1977, 77, 78. And Dan put together this single called Instant Replay. And it floored him at all the disco clubs, including Studio 54. Copies went out to Europe, and Blue Sky Records, Dan's record label, was inundated with requests to, remix it, do a dance version, and do an album to follow up the disco song, Instant Replay. And after doing 3 months of television lip syncing in Europe, coming back, we did the record, and then we went on another 3-month lip sync tour of Instant Replay and our follow-up single called This Is It, all disco. And G.E. Smith was not a happy camper, and
Right.
Vinny was not a happy camper. And they said, nah, I want out of this. I don't want to be doing disco. And I said, Dan, I will stand with you. You want to get rid of them? I will continue being your drummer. Disco, pop, whatever you want to do. I believe in you. And I managed to get on 1 or 2 tracks of his second record. I did the first record. And 6 months, Monty, of lip syncing, Instant Replay, and This Is It, all over the freaking world.
That's crazy.
2-3 times a day, different television studios. And we were going crazy after a while. And, just slathering on the craziest, like Michael Jackson makeup he had for Thriller. We were looking like zombies and lip syncing to Instant Replay. We were rebelling in our own way. And we must have done like 100 TV shows in Europe. And then we came back, did the record, and then did another 50, 75 TV shows of lip syncing only lip syncing of instant replay. We were on Soul Train, Monte, Soul Train, Dick Clark Show, Dinah Shore, and instant replay was going strong for like 6-7 months. So I was a happy camper and I stuck with Dan. But then my demos began being heard by certain people. And I got back in touch with Mick Ronson. And he said, listen, I'm producing Ellen Foley from Meatloaf's record with Ian Hunter. I want you to play drums. I said, I'd love to, Mick. And I'd love to. And he said, you see, I told you we'd be playing again. And right after we do that, we're going to go out and promote Ian Hunter's You're Never Alone with the Schizophrenic record. We're going to do 3-4 months of the Hunter Ronson show. And that was an awesome band.
I can imagine that was, yeah.
And after 3-4 months, I told them, look, I'm getting grief from my manager. They want me to stop touring with Hunter Ronson and begin working on my own solo records. And whenever Mick was in town, he would help me in the studio. I think Warner Brothers heard the first 3, and then they wanted to hear the other 3. And Mick was there helping me. Lorna Luft was there helping me. Ellen Foley was helping me. Cyndi Lauper was helping me. Oh my God, everyone was rooting for me. And it was such a grand feeling because everyone loved the music. It was uplifting and poppy. So Mick was right. We did end up getting back together and doing records and playing together for another year and a half. And that's a happy tune. And I was such a happy camper, man. I couldn't, Monty, I couldn't dream of a better scenario of working with my all-time guitar hero, Mick Ronson, with Sparks. Well, without Sparks for a year and a half and recording music with him and writing with him and jamming with him every day. And then with Sparks for that 5 hours of lost cassette music. I know who's got copies of it, and I'm not supposed to open up my mouth. I think there's a heavy price being rewarded for whoever can produce a copy of the day that Mick Ronson and Sparks went through the Big Beat catalog at Mick Ronson's house. I think the going rate is like $50,000.
Well, look, I mean, this has been a great. It's been great to talk with you.
Was it a good interview?
Much. What's that?
Was it a good interview?
Oh yeah, I think let's finish up and then we'll talk a little bit.
All right.
But so when you look back at that time with Sparks, it was short, but it sounds like it was something that was really meaningful to you and that you have a lot of good memories.
Yeah, Monty. It was like I was like the cannonball boy being shot out of the cannon, with fireworks going. A year and a half with Mick, and then Mick with Sparks together, and then again with Mick and Ian, and then again with Mick and Ian for Ellen Foley, and then with Dan Hartman, and then my record. And I had no time to process this amazing stuff that was going on in my life. And it's only now when I look back, Monty, and I realize what had happened to me in such a short period of time. And it should be noted, I never drank. I never took drugs. I never did any of that stuff. And I was like a health freak. And I was doing cardiovascular exercises on a bike every day and doing pump up exercises. Me and Russell Mail would talk about our different exercise routines. And I was so fit as a fiddle. And all this great stuff was happening to me at the same time, Monty. It's pretty inexplicable to put into words the emotions that were pouring into my heart playing with my two favorite musical acts in my life.
Well,
It was overwhelming.
it sounds like you
Overwhelming.
really do appreciate everything you've done.
Oh my God.
And you're you have a very wonderful career to look back on and to appreciate. And I'm really glad that you spent some time with me talking about the span of your career, because it's unique and it's something that people need to know about.
It is unique, and thank you. And people are now just discovering Hilly Michaels' video, Calling All Girls, and going bonkers over it, and having me do podcasts just about calling all girls and how I did it and how it came to be, and the rotoscoping and the animation. And it's being rediscovered. And it's just great, Monty. Things
Well,
are
it's a
coming
great
full
song, and
circle.
it's a great song, and you've made great contributions to Sparks, and that is very appreciated. And thank you for spending a little time with me tonight.